Canada, by the way, imposes a 250 to 300% tariff on many of our dairy products. They do the first can of milk. They do the first little carton of milk at a very low price, but after that it gets bad, and then it gets up to 275, 300%.
And I think this last 2 months, I don't think we want to be relying on the Americans for anything, especially food.
Trump is also saying he is ready to put a new tariff on some Canadian dairy imports.
Hey, welcome back to the channel. There's something happening right now that almost no one's talking about. A quiet standoff that started not with oil or cars, but with milk. Yes, milk. The same thing sitting in your fridge this morning might just be part of the newest front in the US-Canada trade war. In 2025, the United States discovered that even a harmless commodity could turn into a geopolitical weapon. Under the USMCA, American producers are allowed to sell only 3.6% of Canada's $17 billion dairy market tariff-free. Go beyond that, and the walls go up fast. 298% on butter, 241% on milk. That's not protection anymore. That's exclusion. When Ottawa suddenly froze new import quotas, thousands of gallons of U.S. milk piled up at the Ontario border. Prices in Wisconsin, America's dairy land, collapsed by nearly $3 per hundredweight, while hundreds of contracts worth over $250 million disappeared overnight. And that's when people began calling it the White War. Almost a trade conflict fought not with sanctions or steel, but with something as simple and essential as a glass of milk. So, what really happened behind those tariff walls? And how did Canada turn dairy into one of the most powerful levers in North American trade? Before we dive in, tap that like button. It tells YouTube this content matters. But the story didn't end at the border. What began as a few delayed shipments of milk soon rippled through the heart of America's farming belt, places where every gallon of milk isn't just a product, but a paycheck, a mortgage, and sometimes a legacy. In Wisconsin, the dairy industry supports over 150,000 jobs and pumps $45.6 billion into the state's economy. Yet, as Canada's market tightened, that backbone started to buckle. Family farms that had weathered decades of price swings suddenly faced a collapse they couldn't control. Across the border in Pennsylvania, nearly 5,000 dairy farms now face combined annual losses of more than $100 million, triggering a wave of bankruptcies and forced mergers. Many farmers say it's not just about losing profits. It's about losing identity. Back in Wisconsin, analysts estimate total damages have already surpassed $300 million in 2025 alone, up from the $289 million losses recorded just a few years earlier. For a mid-sized farm with around 250 cows, that means roughly $56,000 in lost income every year, enough to push entire families out of the business. Midwestern senators have begun to sound the alarm, warning that this isn't just an agricultural issue. If we lose Canada, one said, we lose the heart of American agriculture. The message is clear. What looks like a trade dispute on paper is, in reality, a slow bleed through America's rural economy. If you've made it this far, consider subscribing. It's how we keep uncovering what others won't say. And while American farmers struggled to stay afloat north of the border, Canada was quietly reinforcing its defenses. What looked like a trade imbalance to Washington was, from Ottawa's perspective, a carefully engineered shield, a system designed not only to protect its farmers, but to preserve control over an entire sector of the economy. Under Canada's tariff rate quota, TRQ system, anything beyond the small tariff-free allowance faces steep penalties, up to 298% on butter and 241% on fluid milk. Those numbers aren't just high, they're effectively prohibitive, turning the border itself into an economic fortress. Critics in the United States accuse Canada of manipulating its TRQ allocations by giving import licenses primarily to domestic processors rather than independent distributors. As a result, between 2022 and 2023, only about 42% of available import quotas were actually used, leaving millions of gallons of potential U.S. exports stranded on the other side. When the USMCA was signed, Washington projected an additional $277 million in dairy exports to Canada, but years later, that growth has barely materialized. Reports from March 2025 revealed that just 3.5% of Canada's $17 billion dairy market remains truly open to American producers. To U.S. trade officials, this setup represents what they call the highest tariff wall in the developed world. But to Ottawa, it's something different, a safeguard, a mechanism to keep rural communities stable, and a way to prevent global price shocks from tearing through its domestic market. In essence, Canada didn't just build a wall, it built leverage. Behind the image of protecting family farmers lies something far more strategic, a geopolitical tool disguised as domestic policy. In Canada, milk isn't just a commodity, it's leverage that can reach all the way to Washington. Since the 1970s, Canada's supply management system has tightly controlled production and prices, guaranteeing stable income for roughly 9,700 dairy farmers and shielding the sector from global price swings. Across parties and decades, Parliament has treated this system as untouchable, the nation's sacred cow. What began as protection has become power. When tensions rise, Ottawa can quietly cut import quotas or delay approvals, subtle actions that send tremors through U.S. dairy states like Wisconsin and Pennsylvania. As one trade advisor put it, Canada doesn't need tanks. If it squeezes milk, Wisconsin trembles. By turning protection into leverage, Ottawa has built not just market stability, but a form of soft power. One that works through precision, not confrontation. As tensions rose, Washington returned to a familiar script, the pledge to put America first. But in practice, that promise backfired, turning the dairy industry into an unintended casualty of its own trade agenda. By early 2025, the Trump administration launched a formal review of the USMCA, arguing that Canada's quota system violated the spirit of free trade. Behind the scenes, officials weighed a 25% tariff on Canadian butter and cheese, a move that threatened the tightly linked food supply chain across both nations. The National Milk Producers Federation urged the White House to invoke USMCA's dispute settlement mechanism, potentially escalating the standoff into a full-scale case. Ottawa signaled it could retaliate by limiting exports of low-cost milk proteins vital to U.S. cheese and yogurt makers. What followed was a costly stalemate. Prices rose, consumers paid more, and small producers on both sides were caught between two competing definitions of fairness. In the end, milk, once a symbol of daily life, became a reminder of how fragile North America's economic interdependence can be, and how easily protection can turn into self-inflicted pain. Step back and a deeper irony begins to surface. The world's largest economy is finding itself cornered, not by oil, technology, or defense, but by something as ordinary as milk. What's being tested isn't just market strength, but strategic balance. Nearly 43% of all U.S. dairy exports flow to Canada and Mexico, making North America the industry's lifeline. In 2024 alone, Canada imported around $1.118 billion worth of American dairy, roughly 5.6 billion pounds of raw milk in equivalent volume. That means even the smallest policy change in Ottawa can ripple through America's supply-demand equation almost instantly. The dependency runs deeper than most realize. Since 2005, more than 70% of U.S. skim milk products, the base for powders, protein concentrates, and infant formula, have been exported abroad. When that outlet tightens, prices at home collapse, triggering a wave of bankruptcies and on-farm consolidations across the Midwest. It's not just an economic shift, it's a loss of autonomy. The U.S. dairy market, once a symbol of domestic strength, now moves to rhythms set partially outside its own borders. As one Penn State economist put it, we're losing control of the value chain right at our own border. In other words, the United States may have built an empire of exports, but in doing so, it also built a dependency that's proving harder to manage than anyone expected. By now, it's clear that the so-called milk war isn't just about price tags or trade deficits. It's become a stress test for the entire USMCA framework, revealing how deeply strategy and sovereignty are intertwined in North American economics. If Canada continues to fortify its protectionist system, the United States may be forced to redefine its role in the continental food supply chain, shifting from dominance to adaptation. And in that adjustment lies a broader question. Who truly sets the rules in a market where interdependence cuts both ways? Some analysts already speak of a milk cold war, a stalemate where neither side can afford to retreat, yet both know separation is impossible. The risk isn't limited to dairy. Trade experts warn these tensions could spill over into softwood lumber, aluminum, or even energy, further complicating a region once built on cooperation. For Ottawa, dairy may now serve as a subtle but powerful signal, a reminder that Canada won't quietly accept unilateral pressure from Washington. The message is quiet but unmistakable. Influence no longer flows in just one direction. And that leaves one final question. Will this white weapon merely chill cross-border relations, or will it reshape the balance of power across all of North America? Thanks for watching. And if this resonated with you, don't forget to like and subscribe. Every click fuels the truth.